So we're really pleased to have Tim White. Tim lives in Cheshire, where he's a current Board of Ed member, as well as a former member of the Town Council and Energy Commission. From Tim's perch on the board, he advocates for a sustainable approach to Cheshire's ongoing school modernization project. Professionally, Tim works at Yale School of the Environment, where he enjoys pushing our energy transition forward at the intersection of finances and facilities. So Tim, I will pull up your slides, and we look forward to hearing about your experiences in Cheshire.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I just want to caution everybody, my son is home today, so I may get attacked in the middle of the meeting. I'm not sure, but I think we should be able to move forward pretty easily. So yeah, a few years ago, I forget, 3 or 4 years ago, our police department actually approached us on the Energy Commission and said that they wanted to, they were thinking about doing a solar carport. So basically, well, there's the map of where Cheshire is in the state, and you can't see it very well. It's too small. Sorry about that. But if you advance a screen, Mark. Yeah, so there's a better view of what we have after the fact of our solar carport, and I'm curious to know now how that comports with what Kieran did, the solar potential that his work shows. So really, I think there's two things that I want to cover here, which is, first of all, considerations before the project, and then lessons learned after. If you advance the slide. So the considerations before were our town. The easiest way to get anything passed through our town, and I suspect through many towns, is from an economic perspective. If you can save money, you're probably going to get a lot more support, a lot broader support for doing something, rather than having an increased rate per kilowatt hour. So our rate, the rate that we were paying was about 14.5 cents per kilowatt hour delivered. And the PPA rate, so we went out to bid, we got a few proposals. The rate that we ended up getting back was, about 12.6 cents with no escalator for 20 years. And that included a small ZREC, because the small ZREC is 100 kilowatt, 100 kW or less. And then medium ZREC, large ZREC would be more than 100 kW. And for anyone who wants to visualize that, you can imagine what Kieran was talking about, 420 watts. So I'm sure that's a standard solar panel that you see anywhere. That's going to be 2.5 of those solar panels will get you to 1 kW. So you can just multiply that out to see how big these things would be in terms of 100 kW versus, anything over that, even up to a megawatt. Generally speaking, now this is in terms of the economics, the way I look at this is the small ZREC this year is probably going to be about 9 cents per kilowatt hour. It's actually, the small ZREC was set in place. The medium and large ZREC incentives, there's an auction that happens for those, but I'm just estimating that's probably about 5 cents per kilowatt hour this year. And so that directly reduces the rate of the PPA that you'll be paying. The other considerations, the environmental benefits, the aesthetics are a big one. And one that came up for our town was fire truck access. Ultimately, what happened when the proposal got to the Planning and Zoning Board, there were some questions raised by our PZC members. It slowed the approval process down by about 2 months, I think, because our PZC meets once a month. So this is just something to consider, particularly if if you're coming up to construction season ending, say in November. I think that's generally when it's considered to unofficially end. Just to have those ducks in a row, be aware of those things. But basically the fire truck access was raised, and ultimately what happened was we had to raise the height of the canopies by a few feet, which obviously had an impact on the cost, the raw materials going into it. So we ended up doing it, and we thought things were going to be great, and there were real benefits to it. But there was also a significant drawback that we found in our project. Mark, if you could advance a slide. Here's the visual of it. We we ended up using bifacial, and I know this was mentioned just a few minutes ago during Kieran's presentation. We used the bifacial modules, and as a result of that, we could not put decking underneath it. And without having decking underneath the bifacial modules, what happens now is in the winter, the snow melts and it doesn't all just flow down to it doesn't all just flow straight down to the end of the carport and off to the edge of the parking lot. It comes right through in between the panels and it ices. So then we end up having ice ice on our parking lot in between cars where they're parking. I'm not sure if decking is the only option. You may very well just have like smaller pieces that go between panels at this point. I don't know if Eric might even be able to speak to that, or somebody else could, but this is the problem that we encountered when we did this, and we used the bifacial modules and it didn't have connections between the modules to keep the water and the ice out. If you could advance a panel. And so, sorry, oh, good. Yeah, so lessons learned from what we did. So I was mentioning the bifacial modules. So decking is possible, and maybe there's some other options, but it's likely going to increase the cost of any project that you do. That's going to result in higher PPA rates. The best way, I mean, to me, the best possibility you'd get would probably be like a small ZREC, a smaller project with a higher incentive. But based on, so right now the town of Cheshire is doing some school modernization stuff. Sort of going along with that, we're looking at some solar carports or solar canopies. And one of the recent conversations I had with an installer about this was that if we do decking on an array that is under 100 kW, then the cost of that array, the PPA rate, will likely be higher than what we're paying Eversource right now. So instead of paying 14 cents, the PPA rate would probably come in at, say, 15 cents. So it would be that much more difficult to get, broad support with the public and with the elected officials. But one alternative to that is projects are going to have any of these solar canopies are going to have certain fixed costs. As an example would be the cement truck that comes to do the delivery for the day. Just the fact that the cement truck is coming has a cost baked into it. So if you do a larger array with that one cement truck for one day, those costs of the decking will be spread out over a larger array, and you'll end up getting a lower rate, a lower PPA rate. So where I am right now on June 4th is thinking I want to try to push some of these larger ones through the town of Cheshire, but because it's likelier to have a better rate. But there's the cutoff that we have. That's a real deadline, which is June 14th. We have to submit requests or proposals for the medium and large ZRECs. Anything after that, I think you have to go with a small ZREC for the next few months. So this is something where you probably want to act quickly on if you want to do something like this right now. When I say that, I'm talking about in terms of like this year. I don't know what the legislature might be doing this year in terms of ZRECs into the future or how incentives may play out. But for right now, there is a deadline only 10 days away. And then just some other things to consider. My understanding is that when you do include decking, it may end up requiring building permits, which if you're doing this on behalf of the town, my guess is that's something that you could make happen relatively easily. And then other options, I'm not sure if you don't have the decking and you have that issue with the ice flowing through, other options. We have a floating array at our landfill using the virtual net metering, or, maybe parks for shading, baseball fields or something like that, where you're not going to be as concerned about icing in the wintertime. And that is it for me, and I'm happy to take questions.
Tim, one question was, can you explain what you mean by decking in this context?
Sure. If you just go back to the one slide. It's basically just like, say, a piece of plastic, a piece of wood, you know, some sort of composite, I'm not sure what, but it just lays across all of those panels underneath it. And then any water that was melting through would just be sliding down to the lowest point on the overall array, and presumably out to like the edge of a parking lot typically. Now, I know some arrays could be in the middle of a parking lot. So I'm speaking very generally as to how these things could happen, but the decking would be one big piece of material that would make sure the water is not flowing in between the modules. But again, I don't know. Eric or somebody else may have better ideas. I envision a situation where you could have like a little piece of rubber that just goes in between each of these panels that might be able to address that at this point. This project happened a few years ago. And the technology, or even if it's not really technology, the projects may have changed a bit.
Yeah, that was another question about just sealing between the panels. So that's probably a good question for Earthlight. I know there was another question. I think you had a number of 12.6 cents in your per kilowatt hour in your PPA. How did that compare to what we're paying?
We're paying, well, the rest of our consumption is probably going to be around 14.5 cents. And it depends, you know, each individual town building can have different rates depending on what it is. But generally speaking, we're paying around 14.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So we're saving about 2 cents per kilowatt hour.
This is Catherine from West Hartford. I asked that question. So I'm wondering, you said the 14.5 cents is delivered. So I assume that includes your supply rate and your delivery. And then you said the PPA rate is 12.5 cents or 12.6. So typically the PPA rate is just what would be considered the supply portion.
Oh, so what I'm saying is the delivered, it's delivered, it's behind the meter. So there's no delivery cost for it, really. So it's effectively the same thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because of the net metering.
That's right. Thanks.
Oh, sure.
But in this case, this offered not only some co-benefits of protecting the emergency equipment, but it actually saved money in this case, which isn't, probably we're going to learn, isn't always the case.
No. And actually, you mentioned about the equipment. That is another point that I didn't make, which is part of the reason why the police department specifically asked about this was because of the nature of their work. Literally seconds to get out the door and get on the road and move. If it's snowing out, the snow doesn't stop for an emergency. They have to take, you know, an extra 10, 20, however much seconds or minutes to clear their cars off at times to get there. Their idea was to have covered parking for themselves. So I think that's a real benefit that, you know, any town that parks their police cars or even fire trucks, although I don't think I've seen fire trucks outside, but at least police cars, I think they could benefit from it as long as they didn't have this icing issue. In terms of, and I say that in terms of pitching it to town governments, if you're looking to do that.
Okay, excellent. Well, there are a bunch of questions still, but I think a lot of them relate to construction type stuff. So, Tim, thank you very much. It's really, it's always great to hear from someone who has actually done this and been part of a team that, you know, that got it done. So congratulations and thanks for sharing your insights. And I think there will be, you know, in the open discussion, I'm sure there will be questions that relate to you as well. So